Welcome to another episode of Trident Talks. I'm Gareth Davies, and I specialize in helping early and growth stage vendors build their go-to-market teams. And today I'm joined by Michael Coates of Seven Hill Ventures. Michael, thanks for joining us. Do you want to briefly introduce yourself and give us an overview of what you're doing at the minute?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Gareth. Thanks for having me on. Wow, I probably could talk for a while on just the intro, but I'll keep that brief. Let's see. I'm a cybersecurity guy through and through. 20 years in the industry, and I've seen it from every angle, from a red team hacker breaking into banks and governments and telcos at the beginning, to leading cybersecurity at some of the biggest companies in the world, tech companies at least, Twitter, Mozilla. Took a stint as chairman of OWASP as well for about, I guess, on the board for a decade. And then a founder of Altitude Networks, a co-founder of that great cybersecurity company. Took that through acquisition and now in venture capital. The through line of all of this is cybersecurity. I just can't get away from it. And I love the innovation going on, the challenges between deep technical nuance and business success, go to market. So all of those things really get me excited. So now I get to work with the best founders in the world, solving the top problems that need to be solved.
Cool. And if we go back to almost the very start of kind of your leadership positions, if we start at maybe Twitter, what was it really like being a CISO, the first CISO at Twitter during its growth phase?
It was a really interesting role. I came in around 2014 or so, and yes, I was the first chief information security officer for the company. So it was very much charting a course amongst leadership of what this role even was. You know, when I came into the company, originally I was kind of nestled deep down in infrastructure engineering, leading security activities, and that. I mean, you can start wherever you start, but like if you want a security program for the whole company, we have to elevate this up. And very quickly we did. And Jack was my boss for the majority of my time there. But we dealt with all sorts of interesting challenges. It was a conglomerate of startups. There was 5,000 people or more working there, but it had this deep, fast-moving startup mentality as many different acquisitions were put together to build the different teams. And so it was everything from standard blocking and tackling, just wrapping your heads around like what's our inventory? Are we actually updating, configuring, doing the normal 101 hygiene things correctly? To, on the other hand, having very deep threats like nation states come after you. And as you can read about if you go back into the news archives, within the first 6 months, I was dealing with a nation state intrusion that was coercing an employee to
Oh,
divulge data.
wow.
And these are the types of things that we dealt with, week in, week out. And so it was a very interesting role because from the outside, many people saw Twitter as a light-hearted place to say you're making a ham sandwich. And then they saw it more as a, wait, this is a platform where uh, truth is being spoken to the world, where things are being shown a light. And then, as you know, the U.S. presidential election came about, it had its own new twist of what it was being used for. So the evolution, as people looked at that, they were probably coming to terms with the power that the platform held. And internally, we were doing the same thing. We were focused on all of the challenges, all the potential pitfalls, while the rest of the company also was working around all the exciting, positive use cases of it. So it was a really fascinating time.
We could probably spend the next 40 minutes chatting purely about
Yes.
Twitter, right? And what
Yes.
you, and what that was really like. And it's interesting that you mentioned that yes, you had 5,000 employees, but it was very fast paced. It's not something you would usually associate with such a big business, right? You would usually think of a lot of red tape, a lot of approvals needing, and but the fact that it wasn't that is interesting in itself. Did you ever feel like totally in control whilst working at Twitter because of how the speed of things, because of the threat actors that were targeting Twitter at the time? Did you ever genuinely feel in control, or were you always a little bit maybe anxious or maybe a little bit nervous that all bases weren't covered and maybe you were vulnerable?
I think that's a key feeling of the CISO role, is that you always have a feeling of being overwhelmed. But I think it's actually the right feeling in the sense that Your job is not to eliminate all risk. Your job is to know about all of it, and your job is to communicate that level of risk in an intelligent way to leadership with a plan and options.
Mhm.
And where you can feel out of control is if you can't wrap your hands around the reality of what is it we have. An unknown is an unknown, but if can we put it in a box like this is poorly understood and the risk around it is this. This is more well understood and the risk is this. Here's our plan of attack to drive down these risks, for this amount of budget. And if you'd like to drive it down more for this amount of budget.
Yeah.
So I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges of the CISO role is that headspace you need to be in to say, there are risks and there are unknowns. And my job is to articulate that, not to try and seek all of them out because it's almost a fool's errand to be able to figure out everything to the nth degree. And if you do, it's probably cost you an inordinate amount of money or it's slowed the business to such a crawl that maybe you are ultra secure, but the competition ate your lunch and that risk trade-off was the wrong trade-off.
Mhm.
Uh, I think one of the reasons why I was able to be successful in Twitter's environment is because I had sort of shaped myself into the Silicon Valley speed at Mozilla. And so prior to this, my time at Mozilla leading security there, we had 500 million users. So we had a big footprint. But the company was a combination of a corporation and a nonprofit and a community element. So walking in the door and trying to think about, all right, how do we protect the source code for Firefox where all these bad things can happen? And finding out like, well, half the source code is from volunteers and you can't do anything. You can't say they must have endpoint security. You can't say they must be secured in this way. You're just getting the code that starts to put you in this reality of like, all right, how do we operate in this level of inconsistency and risk? And so it's challenging, but I think the headspace is critical if you're going to be successful.
And has the CISO role changed or evolved since your days of running Mozilla and Twitter? And if so, what's kind of changed most in expectations from boards and execs?
I think the role is really elevated. I mean, it's been, if you look at it from the last 10 to 15 years, if we go back, it was a head of IT with a security mandate. And I think that was right when you looked at it from just we have some servers and they have to be patched. But but it's really evolved into all parts of the business. And I think what it's done is it has evolved into thinking about risk management, which is correct. And then the element of technology has become pervasive inside of every business line. So it's not just that IT has some servers. It is integrated into, core development, the AppSec field. It's integrated into, SaaS and automated workflows that different teams use. And suddenly everything is digitized and every team touches this. And when you follow the interconnection of that and the risk, you need you need a role that is saying, I can disambiguate what's going on and talk about which of these things are absolutely crazy and which of these things should we put mitigating controls and how do we funnel that back into risk-based thinking for the business. So the biggest transition has been if you go back from, what I'm saying now, go back to this head of IT security, that mindset is far different than thinking about risk and digital connectivity for the business. So it's very much shifted into a CIO/slash risk management style role. And I do think that's right. Some of the other things that are interesting are the collapsing of reporting chains. I see some companies having IT roll into security. Which I think makes a lot of sense. In those organizations, you sometimes would see them butting heads, like, "Oh, we have to do this for IT," and the other, like, "Well, it has to be secure." Like, no, the answer is figure it out. Hit the goals, figure out the balance, and having those roll together. And I think we may see something similar with, at least in high tech companies, with the CTO role. I think there could be an interesting merging of uh, the CTO and the CISO. And I'm not sure exactly how that comes together. But again, once you have this butting of heads of, oh, we want to go ship this stuff and go fast, but we also want it to be secure, but they have to be an integrated solution. I think it's hard to have those be two opposing teams rather than one reporting chain that figures out the balance. So I think that's where the evolution is so far.
I think that we've seen kind of the evolution as well from maybe, like we've seen some CISOs come in that maybe don't come from a technical security background, right? And they come from a different industry, but what they're able to do is translate business risk at board level very, very, very successfully, right? So yeah, like you said, I think the CISO role has changed quite a bit. If you were starting again as a first-time CISO, like today, what would you do differently?
I think having gotten your hands dirty is very valuable. You and maybe it's a continuation to the last question, but the technical CISO I think is very important, and it is perhaps merging into the CTO responsibility lines because I think it's complemented by the control structure GRC style leader. And to continue on, it may be that there's an evolution where those two roles are to some degree peers complementing each other. But I think to your question of what I would do today, I think the most important thing is to have a deep enough understanding of the ecosystem so you can ask the right questions. You'll never be the expert in the room unless you're just horrible at hiring and team building, and then that's a red flag. But if you don't have enough knowledge to push back and to ask, well, why is that the case? Or is that really the best answer? Or to have that inkling of, I don't think I'm getting the whole story. I think you're going to be flawed as a leader. So that's one piece. Get your hands dirty, understand enough of the depth across the cybersecurity challenges. And the other side is totally different, which is understand how the business works, how the business makes money, how they succeed. Because the only way to talk about risk to the business is to understand what matters. And then when you're saying, oh, this is going to slow delivery of a product by X days, understanding market window opportunities, or if it's going to raise the cost of customer acquisition by X dollars, you need to understand those things. So talk to your head of sales, talk to your CFO, talk to head of legal, understand all of these different business drivers so you can pull together the full picture. The CISO role is really fascinating in that it is deeply technical, but also deeply related to business operations and success.
Yeah, there's a huge emphasis on the soft skills as well as the hard skills, right?
Yeah, the psychology of it all is very interesting. I find one of my first jobs was involved the red teaming, but also social engineering. And social engineering is fundamentally getting people to do things you want them to do, but
Yeah,
making it feel like it's their idea. And that really holds true in business quite well. And that's a good skill to use as a CISO too. Like, let's figure out how I can make my agenda become something they want to do on their own.
yeah, definitely. And then after you've been a CISO, right, you've then kind of took that experience and went out to build some yourself. What motivated you to start Altitude Networks, and was there a problem that you were trying to solve that potentially you couldn't from inside a large organization like Twitter, or was there a pain point that made you feel right? Okay, well, nobody else seems to be solving this, so let me go and just solve it for everyone.
Fundamentally, I had the desire to start a company at some point in time. And being in Silicon Valley, you're surrounded with this ecosystem. And so it was an opportunity to just soak that in and learn. Between Mozilla and Twitter, I actually joined a fantastic startup called Shape Security. And my goal of going there was to learn, what's it like being inside a high growth cybersecurity startup. I joined around 30 employees. And then fast forward 10 years later, actually, yeah, about 10 years, 7 to 10 years later, they were acquired by F5 for $1 billion. And so being able to see a glimpse into what's the day to day in that world, that was really impactful to me. And then, when I was at Twitter, I kept my eye on opportunities. And what happened was really that epiphany of, oh, here's the problem that needs to be solved. And the reason that it was so obvious is I found myself wanting to buy a solution for this exact problem. I was looking at our continued expansion into cloud applications, things like Box, Google Drive, and of course, there were many others. And I recognized this emerging pain we were having of the software configuration of data protection, access control list, et cetera, is all distributed to every single user. Any user can decide that this random file here should be shared in this way. It'll be shared to the whole company. It'll be shared to my Aunt Jenny over here on Gmail, whatever they want. And you just have to hope they do it right. That's one thing you learn really quickly in cybersecurity is hoping that it goes well, and massive scale and distribution are not a good combination. And so as we saw instances happening, like, wait, why was this critical document exposed to the company? Oh, we have to do a whole deep dive. Did anyone access it? What happened? How do we prevent this? And we told people the 18 steps to do it correctly. Or how did this thing leak to the public? That started to have the light bulb moment of this needs to be solved. And when I went to the market looking for solutions, none existed. When I talked to my peers, I'm like, what am I missing? Like, am I just, an idiot here? They're like, no, we have this problem too. We have no idea what to do. That was the moment. And so, as one does, you work nights and weekends, you experiment, you prototype. I had an amazing technical co-founder that I knew for a number of years, and we launched that initial product, and that was when we're like, this is something. We need to take this out and solve this for everyone. And so it was great. We went through the journey. We raised a few rounds of funding. We quickly had build partners, and took that through a number of great customers across the country, and then eventually through acquisition. So it was fantastic over 4 years to see that whole process.
And I know we spoke about the ability to articulate yourself well, right, as a CISO and articulate risk, and what it would cost to a business. You know, do you think that skill served you really well as a CEO of your own business? Is Yeah, I suppose that's what I'm asking. Yeah, is that one of the biggest things you took from being a CISO into a founder?
The cybersecurity startup ecosystem is challenging. I mean, it's challenging for a number of reasons, but one of them is the absolute saturation of the market with so many different players doing so many different things. And so as a CISO receiving that information, it's overwhelming. And I learned this at Twitter. I literally created a filter that filtered all external email to a folder that I ignored. And I would go in there periodically and grab a domain like, oh no, I need to see that. And I would whitelist that domain. And sometimes that a person at that domain. And everything else was ignored. Despite having a role where I could get any information I wanted, the overwhelming effect of it was that I actually got nothing. And many CISOs are in this position where when they want to know the latest and greatest approaches to something, it's harder to get because if they ask the world, they'll get inundated with ambulance chasers or overzealous, embellished, pitches.
Yeah, it's just a lot
And
of
so the
noise.
thing that the thing that I took into it as a founder was this trusted network. I could reach out to people and say, I've been in your shoes.
Mm.
Here's the TLDR. Here's actually what we're solving. If this is a pain you're having, I'm happy to help. I'm happy to give you all the techniques that I've used and the solution itself if that works. And I think that's the shortcut or the only path as a cybersecurity founder is to find ways into circles of trust. So, provided you have a high quality approach and solution, which is generally how you would get in, you can shortcut your way to the right people. So you can actually have that conversation to help them out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. And then obviously, I know that obviously you scaled at Twitter, right? And you would have gone from five to X amount of thousand in employees. Like, was that experience of scale different to what you experienced scaling Altitude?
Yeah, yeah. Um, One thing I gained a deep appreciation for at Twitter was um, autonomy, like autonomous decision making, and not just in humans, but in software.
Mhm.
Um, if a solution couldn't scale, it didn't matter because we needed it to run, thousands of times a second. It couldn't be human gated activities because we were constantly shipping code. Attacks are happening on the platform continuously. And so it really drove home this thinking of it needs to be code and it needs to scale that way.
Mhm.
And then I think at Altitude Networks, we were designing a solution that was a near real-time solution for data sharing. And so we had to fundamentally architect it the same way that when someone is accessing a document and making a security change, within a matter of moments, it's able to process that back and give an alert to a security team or to the user to say this is potentially a very poor decision.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's interesting. I think the element of scale and time is very important because we're overwhelmed with potential alerts in the security industry, and having the right things surface with the right context is really powerful. And I see a lot of different products going this route with, Slack and Teams integration and direct to the user. And if
Mhm.
you do that intelligently, you can have a really nice scaling effect to meet that challenge.
Cool. And then you've since shifted into advising and investing, right? So what was there a point after, or maybe while you were still at altitude, like at what point did you think, okay, this is what I'm going to do next? Like, why didn't you revert back to kind of what you already knew, or maybe start something again?
Yeah, I have a strange desire to just once I figure something out, just keep going and seeking out new things rather than sitting still. But what I did find is that I like to figure things out in the context of the cybersecurity industry.
Mhm.
I had the opportunity while at Altitude Networks to partake in a program designed for founders to become early check investors. It was through a program called Spearhead by Jeff Fagnan from Accomplice and Naval Ravikant, that many people know as a prolific angel investor.
Mhm.
And I really enjoyed that program. It was a chance to invest into your network, into amazing people that you knew that were starting a company, and also hone your craft with feedback from Jeff and Naval, which who would pass up that opportunity. And after doing that for a few years, I then did my own small fund after that. And as the acquisition period came to a close, the company that acquired us, CoinList, I was looking at my next big step, and I knew I wanted to be close to founders, and I knew I wanted to be in cybersecurity.
Mhm.
And having had the success of several years of this initial investing in some really great investments, that became clear that that was where I wanted to go. And in true founder mode, not just joining a big established VC, I went and started my own VC. And the vision really is that the earliest stage of cybersecurity companies, they don't just need capital. There's a lot of people that can give capital, but they
Mhm.
don't really know what they're doing. They need someone that understands the space and can give them feedback of this is how you can talk to a CISO and get their attentions. This is where they're thinking about budget. This is how they're considering your value prop. And then on the same token, having been a founder, let's talk about how you're going to scale your company, position everything for your next fundraise. How are you going to think about build partners, sales channels, et cetera? And so it's a unique space, and I'm really excited to be filling in that early stage cybersecurity VC.
And what do you think maybe early stage vendors often get wrong when, selling into CISOs, or maybe how should they how should founders earn trust and relevance with CISOs in today's world?
I think that the challenge is that cybersecurity founders are fundamentally deeply technical people,
Mm.
and they think about reaching their sales targets through a technical means of I can automate this, I can scale this, I can blast this. And it actually is wrong. Like fundamentally, it's human to human, and you need to build a human connection.
Mm.
So if you're looking to bring in more people that'll make that connection, don't send them emails and ask, do you care about security? Like those things are the worst. Like this is just dumb. Um, Provide them value. If you are connecting to them in a cold fashion, which is the hardest way,
Of course.
give them value. Give them something like, here is information that we've created that you thought you might like. And then go to the next step, do the human connection, get a warm introduction from someone, meet them for coffee. I had vendors that would come and they would bring cookies. And you know what? If they sent me an email, I would definitely have ignored it. But they brought cookies and I went downstairs and I met them. I talked to them for 5, 10 minutes. It was a connection.
Mm.
And that was the one human that I made a connection with over hundreds that had emailed and we ignored. Um, so remember that, like that the human connection is most important. The second piece is just a little bit more strategic, which is think about your rollout plan. What is your wedge that you can get into with your product, and what is your expansion? If you're going to try and compete with SailPoint out of the gate, like that's going to be really hard to replace the IDP. But can you have a stepping stone and then grow from that and then expand? And that's a little bit more tactical well, tactical and strategic. Um, but also equally important.
Yeah, okay, fine. And if I think about the type of founders that you invest in, is there a certain commonality around maybe their energy, the way they articulate themselves? Like it's just from looking at your portfolio of clients that you've worked with, do you find that there's a commonality between them?
It's a very good question, and I think you keep reflecting on the companies you've invested in, the assumptions that you had, your hypothesis, and how those evolved and were proved right or wrong, and whether or not you refine your model. What I've found is that founders that come from deep experience in the cybersecurity space that have been, I would say, like in the trenches, attacking and solving the problem at the biggest scale,
Mhm.
they tend to have seen what's available to the industry. Like, well, I was working at Coinbase, Airbnb, Meta, Google, Stripe, and this was the best that was available and it wasn't good enough,
Mm.
but I know the way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I
Fine.
think that's the starting piece.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fine. So someone that is actually fixing an issue that they once experienced, right,
Yep.
as a hands-on technical person. So yeah, I love that. With the in terms of kind of the tech that you kind of gravitate towards, is there a certain kind of problem that you find that you're more attracted to? Like, for example, if you're for example, you're invested into de facto, right? So was that a problem that you maybe faced whilst you were a CISO or you were running altitude networks? Or is it just something that is something new that's come to light that you think actually, yeah, this is brilliant?
Mhm. I have to watch out for my own biases because my goal is to back founders that are solving massive problems
Yeah.
that need to be solved and will become incredible businesses. And so one of the failure modes as a early investor is to say that's really cool, that really should be solved, but that's only because you think of it from like the nerdy technical way, and it's maybe not a good business opportunity. But interesting that you mentioned de facto because actually that one I uniquely experienced. So they're in non-human identity, and we specifically had this challenge at Twitter where we built our own service-to-service authentication layer. It was one of the things that we identified of risks in the onion of security of while we can't just trust things because they can get to the box, you can't just get onto a box and then impersonate any service you want. That could go, catastrophically poorly. And so at the time, there was no good solution. We built an in-house solution of how do you do intra-service authentication. And so when I talked to the founding team, it immediately was clicked to me of the importance of that. And then as we started to expand on how this is a challenge, non-human identity is a massive challenge across, the Fortune 500 specifically with huge data centers interconnectivity. That plus their novel approach, we start checking the boxes. Highly technical, credible founders, big problem space. They're going to go after a unique approach. Um, so yeah, it all sort of fell in line. But I have to always watch out for that. I have to watch out that my own experience biases me in a negative way. So I always take in these inputs from the rest of my CISO network.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then is there also the fact is a good example, right? Because there's a lot of money and there's a lot of noise within that NHI space, right? We've got Entro, we've got Clutch, we've got Oasis is another one as well, right? So is there is there a particular theme in cybersecurity or a niche within cybersecurity that gets you more excited than the others? Like for example, we've got securing AI at the minute, right? And we've got a load of acquisitions that have happened. AIM Security is one of them. Pangea is another. I think Splix AI have just been acquired today by Zscaler. So, it, yeah, that brings me back to my question. Is there a particular niche within cybersecurity that excites you more
Mm.
than most?
What's really exciting right now is there's a bit of a renaissance. And I get it when I say it, it feels buzzwordy, but what AI has brought to the table is really exciting.
Yeah.
On one hand, we've got security for AI, and there's some interesting things to do there. I think people dabbled in prompt injection, but that was sort of like the surface level, and they got much deeper. And we have deeply integrated AI connectivity security plays, and we have large players. I was happy to be in Noma very early across the entire LLM AI security space.
Mhm.
The other side, though, is also interesting, which is AI for security.
Yeah.
And that is saying, can we rethink how we fundamentally tackle this security problem with an AI designed approach? And then you can take old stodgy security industries and flip them on their head,
Mhm.
like email security. It's been there forever. We've got huge behemoths in the space. We've got some interesting innovators that are 8, 9 years old. And now we've got a new crop coming at it with fundamentally AI powered approach. I love that. DLP is another one.
Yeah.
Same thing. Maybe we can flip it on
AppSec
its
is the
head.
same as well, right?
Yep. Yep.
OpenAI have just released a new tool, haven't they, for the AppSec space? So yeah, uh,
Yeah, Aardvark is gonna be, I'm still processing
yeah,
every day. I think that's gonna send some big ripples through in a good way, but it's gonna shake things up.
yeah, cool. And Michael, where can listeners follow your work and maybe learn more about what you're doing next?
Yeah, sevenhillventures.com and LinkedIn. I try and share everything on there and connect with people. I host physical get-togethers over drinks in San Francisco and tend to hit the conference scene as well.
Cool, Michael. Obviously, this has been brilliant, right? To have somebody, like I said to you, I've interviewed VCs, founders, and CISOs, but I've never had the pleasure of interviewing them all at once in one person. So I really appreciate you joining me on this episode of Trident Talks.
Thank you much. Appreciate it.